There was no rules. There was no God telling me what I could and couldn't do. There was nobody telling me what was right or wrong.
Before you start something, decide if it's worthwhile, and then go try your absolute hardest.
From $0 in revenue to $35,000 in revenue in the 9 months from when we started the location to June when I quit. Like, so I've explored a lot of different things, like when I first started trying to get my life together. So I started my first business at 11.
Positive reinforcement really helps, though, if you just give them a treat when they do the right thing.
I don't even know what I'm doing. I don't have any project management. Like, I don't know how to pay taxes. And the girl working behind the counter was super cute. And I'm like 14 years old, maybe 13. You're going to be the CEO. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, my ego feels great. I'm like, look at me go. Because I'm making zero money, but I feel like a millionaire and I'm acting like a millionaire.
Welcome to the Willpower Podcast. How long have you been in Austin?
I first came to Austin in October of 2021, October 2021, and then kept on coming back, and I've been living here like full-time, having a house, having a lease since September of last year, so 2023.
Okay. Where were you before?
Colorado. So grew up in a small town, like 10,000 people, Western Slope, like literally had a mountain as my backyard. 20 minutes from the ski resort. It was nice, man.
Dude, I've never skied down. I like grew up skiing a bunch. I'm from Minnesota.
Okay.
And I've never like skied down a mountain. Like in Minnesota, when you go skiing, it's like you go for like literally 1 minute and then you just take the thing back up.
Yeah.
It's like these tiny little hills.
Little bunny hills.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, Colorado's built different, man. It's yeah, like I remember when I was in, I want to say like 7th grade, one of my buddies, Dalton, his older brother, paralyzed himself. He skied off a cliff, and so it was on the ski resort, like in the middle of a run. Like there's just a cliff in the middle of the mountain on a random run, like not blocked off or fenced off. There's just like a cliff, and I remember we were like, oh my god, Dalton's brother got paralyzed, and now he's like a big advocate for like paralyzed, like disabled people, like getting out and doing things and like still moving. It's called like Return to Dirt. Is his movement, but it's crazy to think, right? Like intense skiing, bro.
Yeah.
Like gnarly terrain.
It is pretty dangerous.
Yeah. People forget skiing is an extreme sport.
Yeah.
It's like that stuff is metal. It's fun though. Rich people activities. What can you do?
Yeah. So have you gotten into like breath work and all that stuff in Austin or before?
Yeah. Huge. Yeah, when I was like 19 and trying to figure my life out. And so I grew up like super spiritual. Like my first breathwork experience was like 12 years old.
Oh, okay.
So been in breathwork for a bit. But when I was like really trying to figure my life out, I started reading Joe Dispenza. First it was Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself and then Becoming Supernatural. And I remember I was paper shredding and we had like just set up a shop in Denver. Like I moved to Denver. I'm like living in this apartment, first time living alone. Our office, my office inside of like, we opened up the store and my office was literally the windowsill and I would sit on a pack of paper towels. That was like my seat. I have a Snapchat picture of it. And I would just like read Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. And that was like when I really started to like get into that world.
Okay. So you grew up spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
Were your parents into it or what, like how did that happen?
Yeah. So my mom is like a New Thought Christian minister. And so she went to ministry school in like it's like a subsect of Christianity where it's like manifestation and spirituality goes, but it's still within the realm of Christianity. So I grew up like not going to church and not deeply involved in religion or reading the Bible, but coming from a place of like God actually loves you, God has a plan for you, and you're made in his image. So
how does this fit in with, like, is there still the belief in the Bible?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
I think I'm actually the closest to God now in my life than I ever have been.
Okay. So it's everything in the Bible still holds up, but then there's also this additional spiritual kind of side to it. Yeah.
So growing up, it was like a lot more explorational of like, I lived in Morocco for 3 months and like got really into the Quran and Islam. And like, so I've explored a lot of different things. Like when I first started trying to get my life together and wanted to like figure life out, I was a lot more like Eastern religion. Like I was meditating and like manifestation, law of attraction, numerology, astrology. But then it's like, I keep on coming back to Jesus, and then it's like God plus nothing. It's like, I don't need extra complexity. So, but growing up, yeah, it was some extra steps.
So what pulls you towards these as you're going through your life?
It's a good question. I think that when I was young, it was just curiosity. I was a big nerd. So I really like math and science. So like quantum mechanics and like numerology and Nikola Tesla and frequency, like that was a lot more interesting to me. And so I found cymatics because I was really interested in math and science, and I'm in physics class and chemistry. And cymatics was really interesting to me. And that's like the effect that sound and vibration has on physical objects. So I got really interested in that, and quantum entanglement and all these different theories, particle theory and all these different things. And then when I was like 19 years old, I like just moved to Denver. I'm living alone. I have no social circle. I'm working like 60 hours a week. I kind of hated my life. But I wanted to like, I was trying to get sober. I'm trying to like get in shape for the first time in my life. I'm saving for the first time in my life. Like I'm essentially starting from ground zero, if not more negative in terms of personal behaviors and beliefs. So I think that turned me towards like the new age spirituality, because it was like the most agency I could have for myself. So like there was no rules. There was no God telling me what I could and couldn't do. There was nobody telling me what was right or wrong. So like it was kind of the opportunity for me to have total, complete control. And that kind of moved me into that world. And then when I lived in Morocco, like at this point, I'm running a multiple 7-figure company. I'm dating a beautiful woman. I just ran an Ironman. Like I've kind of reached a lot of the things that a couple years before I was holding as my idols. And so like the disciplinary, very rigid, very moralistic view of like Islam was a lot more appealing to me at that point. Because at this point I've done 75 hard. I'm stone cold sober. Like I'm a lot more regimented in my ways. So like Islam appealed. And so like I was in Morocco for Ramadan. So like you fast from sunrise until sunset. So that was like super cool. But then Christianity is like this awesome balance of both, of like God loves you unconditionally and like doesn't really care what you do. There's a verse, I think it's like Isaiah 46:10, that your good deeds are but filthy rags. Like there's nothing you can do to impress God. And he gives us like frameworks and moral compasses and disciplines that we can follow that just make our life better. So it's like the best of both worlds of like, you shouldn't be stoned to death if you do something wrong. And also we love you. Like, so it's like unconditional love, and also like maybe not watching porn is good for you.
Mm-hmm. Some like guidance along with it.
Bingo. Yeah. Like parental wisdom.
So how do you, so this sounds great. It's like you kind of pick what fits your life at that moment, but what about the belief side? Like, how do you just choose to believe something that's like completely different?
That's a great question. So I think that like number one is like, it's all iterative. So you're always building on what came before. So it's like, you have to first examine foundation. For me, the foundation, I've never like God, since I started with mathematics at a very young age, and I was really interested in like science at a really young age, I started with the foundation of like, there's way too much precision in the universe for there not to be some kind of creator. So like my foundation was something exists. Now let me figure out what my relationship with something is. And then it was just kind of exploring like through trial and error and through like actual reasoning and the evidence that I can gather as a very fallible person, what actually makes the most sense. And then like, how do I build the belief? I think it's just exposure, right? It's like, can I test this? Like I had a friend of mine ask me the other day, like, when was the last time you questioned your belief, like your faith? And I'm like, dude, I do it every day. Cause it's like, if I don't examine what I believe, then like, it's not going to get stronger. It's like, if I don't go to the gym, I'm not going to build muscles. It's if I don't actually read the word and understand why the word is the way it is and understand the context behind it, then I'm not actually going to believe. I'm just making a blind assumption. So that would be how I build belief, is just repetition. It's exposure.
Okay. So let's talk about this period of your life where you're like building yourself up. So before you get to the Ironman girlfriend business, so is this the period when you were a paper shredder?
Yes.
Right before. Okay.
Yeah.
and you're like, you have interest in this, you're reading Joe Dispenza, what is it that like changes, that flips the switch from who you were to who you become?
That's a gnarly question. What is it that flips the switch? So it's interesting because like I have a lot of interesting experiences, but there's not. So there's that saying like luck is preparation meeting opportunity, right? And so I think that at least in my experience or my life, it was the combination, right? So it's the culmination of like I'm moving from watching TV to reading books, like breaking the habit of being yourself. I go from being unintentional with my time to actually writing to-do lists, to meditating, to going to the gym, getting a circadian rhythm. Like I just started moving towards having a better life. So like started going to church and volunteering at church, even though at that point I wasn't a Christian. It was just like, I know that this is a net benefit on society, so I should do this. So I have a good job. I'm saving my money. I'm working out. I'm sleeping more regularly. I'm reading the right books. So I'm putting myself in the right environments. And then what switched, I don't know how to like I'm not going to attribute this to myself, but one morning, so I had this routine. I'd wake up at like 5:30 in the morning. I would go through every day I stretch before anything else. So I'd wake up, I'd stretch, and I'm doing like cat cows and like some like arm positions, like basic yoga first thing in the morning, make my bed. And then my routine at this point in my life was read the Bible. And I would walk outside and I'd go read the Bible and watch the sun come up as I meditated. And that was kind of my morning routine. And then I'd go to work and then come home and gym. And I remember there was this Monday. It was like, I want to say like June 5th or 6th in Colorado. This is in Colorado. I'm working as a paper shredder. And I'm sitting in the park. I'm reading the Bible and I'm meditating. And when I finish meditating, I'm watching the sun come up and I'm walking back to my home. And I just am like, I'm quitting my job today. And it wasn't like a preconceived, it wasn't planned, it wasn't I'm thinking about doing this thing. Like I enjoyed my job. There's obviously like grass is always greener, right? And there were some downsides that I didn't enjoy, but I just like had this conviction on my heart. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna quit my job. Like I don't want to be here anymore. Time for the next thing. And at this point I'd been like experimenting with digital marketing. Like my roommate I don't know if Jack was my roommate at the time, but I had a good friend, a childhood friend who was like building online businesses, and I had tried e-commerce when I was like 17. So like I was familiar with the world. I'd built websites and I'd been playing in that world. I was like, I'm going to quit my job and try this online marketing thing. Yeah. And so like all day that day, I was like looking at flights. I like wanted to leave the country. I was like, I'm going to fly to Bali, but then Bali was closed because of COVID. So I was like, okay, I'll go to Greece instead. Like I just wanted out. And so I think it was like, I prepared without even planning. Like I wasn't planning to quit my job. I wasn't planning to do these things. But then it was like, my uncle called me one day and it was like, run an Ironman, you won't. And I was like, okay, I'll run an Ironman. And so then I started prepping for that. And then it was like one day I'm meditating in the park and I was like, quit your job. And I was like, okay, I will. And then I just went all in. So I like quit my job. Monday I realized that night I called my boss at 6 p.m. and I was like, hey, Dan, if you want 2 weeks, I'll give you 2 weeks. If you want 2 months, I'll give you 2 months, but I'm not staying more than 6. Like I'll give you 6 months because at that point he depended on me. Like I was a very cornerstone in that business. And I was like, if you want 2 months, I'll give you 2 months, but I'm leaving. And he's like, your last day's tomorrow. Get the fuck out of my business. Like he had a temper thing. I love you, Dan, if you're listening. He's a great guy. And I was like, all right, cool. So as soon as I got off the phone, I bought the flight. So I couldn't negotiate with myself. Non-refundable, one-way flight to Greece. I was like, all right, I'm leaving. So, and here's the best part. That call was Monday night. I booked the flight for Thursday. So I gave myself 72 hours to leave the country. And the next morning, Dan calls me and he's like, name your price. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, how much do you want me to pay you to stay? I was like, oh, okay. And so I left. And then, I was gone. And so I just had to jump off the cliff.
Do you think if you didn't have that flight, you might have like
talked me into it?
Bargained with him? Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. I think that, and what's so crazy is like the series of decisions was like frictionless. It wasn't like, oh my God, I hate my job, I need to get out of here. It's like, I appreciate being here. I've done everything I can to be the best steward of this job as possible. Like we went from, first I studied under Dan and I essentially we did paper shredding. So like think of like a large industrial truck with a paper shredder in the back, and you go into like dental offices and law offices and all these different organizations, and they have like essentially dumpsters, like trash cans full of paper. It's confidential document disposal, and we'd bring it out to the truck, we'd shred the paper, and we'd bring the bin back in. So it's like white collar garbage guys. So I shadowed him, and then we go to Denver and we open up a brand new location, no existing paper out, no existing customers. And we go from $0 in revenue to $35,000 in revenue in the 9 months from when we started the location to June when I quit.
It's monthly revenue?
Monthly revenue, yeah. And majority of that was recurring revenue. So it was really cool because we built a 6-figure company in 9 months in a brand new location, and I'm like 19 years old trying to figure out my life. So I'm like, wow, this is awesome. Yeah, so it was a really cool experience. And so I did everything I could to be the best possible steward of that job. I wasn't like, oh my God, get me out of here. I was like, I love what I do. There's issues that I want to fix, but it's time for the next thing.
Yeah, it is cool how those, like when you start putting those habits into your life, it's like you said, you weren't like intentionally preparing for that leap, but when that came to you, you were all of a sudden ready. So it's like having all these habits in your life is just preparing you for like whatever happens. That's very cool. The beautiful girlfriend. You want to tell me about that? Have you always been good with girls? How did that go?
I've always been a social person. So I wouldn't categorize myself as a overtly attractive person, or really, I think like the number one attribute that I credit myself for is my willingness to fail. And so like, I remember I was a Boy Scout. I was like this nerdy Boy Scout, no athletics. I'm interested in like, this is like middle school. I'm interested in like Nikola Tesla, quantum mechanics, and Boy Scouts. So I'm like about as far gone as they go. And like in middle school, our Boy Scout troop, we used to do these road trips, and we'd stop at like Arby's or like Wendy's. And I remember we stopped at this Dairy Queen, and the girl working behind the counter was super cute. And I'm like 14 years old, maybe 13. And I made a ring out of fries, and I go to propose to her with this ring out of fries. And then our Boy Scout leader comes in, he's like, Harrison, get in the car. And I'm like, no, like breaking my heart. Yeah, I mean, I'm a lover boy for sure. Like I just want to be married. I just want to be a homebody. But I just also like getting to know people. I have no issue approaching random strangers, and yeah. So
okay, so you have that natural willingness to fail. That's super important in everything.
For sure.
Especially in dating.
For sure. When it's like I know what I'm looking for, and so it's like if I am very like the woman that I want to pursue is like very rare. And so like 9 out of 10 times I either get rejected or I disqualify them. Of like, okay, I don't want to pursue you. Or more often than not, they're just like, I'm not interested in you. I'm like, okay, well, great. Keep moving.
Okay, so tell me about your early business. Like what it started out as, how it evolved.
Yeah, so I've been building businesses since I was 11 years old. So I started as an entrepreneur out of necessity. Like I never really wanted to, I've never been great with authority. And growing up at a young age, like my dad lost his career. And so a lot of my childhood, my dad was in and out of work, and my parents were trying to figure it out. My dad always wanted to be an entrepreneur. So I got to see a lot of feast and famine as a kid. And so I started my first business at 11. Obviously it didn't go great. And then I started
what was it?
I was a lemonade stand at the farmer's market. So we called it, I've never actually told this, I don't think, on the internet. We did, it was called Magic Lemonade. It was fresh squeezed lemonade with a magic trick. And so that was like the novelty. And so we introduced novelty, and we had a starving market. So we were at a farmer's market. So it's hot. Everybody's getting food, but nobody has a good drink. So we had a good drink, quality product, paired with novelty of every glass of lemonade gets a free magic trick. And so we'd bring a crowd for the magic tricks, and then we'd be like, oh no, someone buy lemonade so we can do another magic trick. And it's like two adorable 11-year-olds, like who's not going to spend $7 on a cup of lemonade? Like we were robbing people for sure, but it was good entertainment, paid well. Yeah, and then I got into, when I was, we'll call it a business of herbs and spices in high school. That's probably where I really cut my entrepreneurial teeth. And then coming out of high school, I started a photography company. So I got really into real estate photography. And then real estate photography led into website design. And I'm just iterating, right? So it's like I tried drop shipping. So we had drop shipping, and then got into photography, which led to website design, and then going through the paper shredding company. The paper shredding company is called Paperwise. And so Paperwise, I rebuilt the website, launched a bunch of Facebook ads and Google ads, and started creating content for them. And that's where I really started the company. So when I quit my job, I started a social media marketing agency. And I didn't really know what I was doing, but it was like we did everything. So I was like, oh, you need a landing page? I'll make you a landing page. Oh, you need to run Facebook ads? We'll run Facebook ads. You need social media content? Great. So I was just kind of throwing stuff at the wall. So again, willingness to fail.
And so early on, you're just kind of doing everything. Like whatever they need, you're the guy.
Yeah,
you're gonna
for
figure
sure.
it out. I had another question. I'm blanking on it now. Oh yeah. So you do all these different things, and I think that's a huge thing for being a successful entrepreneur is just trying a lot of different stuff. How do you know when to give up on something?
That's a great question. So I mean, number one, it's like you have to embrace the fact that failure is guaranteed. It's actually like the first indication of success is like, okay, I tried something and it didn't work, which means that it can work, which means let me unpack this. So I think like a couple things that I want to highlight is like, number one, you have to be willing to go through the process of not knowing how to do the thing before you get to the stage of knowing how to do the thing. And you either have to do that for free, or you have to do that at a job, or you have to do that as an entrepreneur. I don't think doing it for free works because now you have no accountability or outside pressure, external pressure to actually do the thing. So I think you have to create some kind of external accountability or pressure to actually get through the stage of failure. And now the downside of that is like you have to set the right expectations of like something I didn't do is like when I was early on, I'm like, oh, I know how to do this. I can take care of that when I didn't. And like just being honest of that, of like, can I sell myself to this person of, hey, I will do everything necessary. I'll do the homework. Like you're essentially buying my time so that I learn how to do this instead of you. I think that's a much more fair way to approach it when I was learning early on. It's like setting the right expectations. Your original question was
How to know when to
quit.
cut something off. Yeah.
I think it's actually before you make the decision to pursue it. And so I think, because like there's the stages of, they say like uninformed optimism followed by like informed pessimism and then informed optimism once you gain competency. I think like first you do the vetting of like, okay, I know I'm uninformed and optimistic about this. So like I'm not expecting the amount of work it's going to take, and I'm not expecting actually how good the opportunity is. I think that's the stage of like, let me do the research before I decide to do this thing of, is this an opportunity worth pursuing? So it's, if I expect this to take 10 times the amount of work that I think it is, and let me actually look at like, okay, does this pay off? Is this proven? Does this have reliability? Does this actually get me closer to what I want? Like, is this actually like, if I'm going to drive a car, is this the car I want to be driving for every single reason? Practicality, is it got the performance that I want? Like, is this actually worth pursuing? Because then it's like, I heard this thing, it's like, once you make a decision to do something, how you feel about doing it doesn't matter. So it's like, once you actually decide, hey, I'm going to pursue this, like, it's no longer relevant whether or not you're successful because you're actually pursuing it. It's like the Wright brothers, right? It's like, they decided, they're like, hey, we're going to fly. And then once they decided we're going to fly, it didn't matter how many times they failed, because they'd already made that decision. Same thing with the 4-minute mile. So I think the requirement is decide whether or not it's worth pursuing. Is this a worthwhile pursuit? Once you decide it is, like, cut out the noise, just pursue it.
But then at what point, like, when do you stop pursuing it? Because you, like, there are things you pursue and then you don't achieve it, or you decide that, okay, this is not actually what I want to pursue. How do you build that in? Because I think there's value to like giving it a go, right? Like, I'm going to try my hardest at this thing, but where do you cut yourself off?
Where do you draw the line? Maybe I'm just bad at that. Yeah, maybe that's like, I would not consider myself like I'm.
But let's say like drop shipping. Do you still do drop shipping?
No.
So why'd you stop?
That's a great question. Yeah, I actually examined some more. I think that, I mean, obviously there's an element of like, I just quit before I got results. Of like, there's a reality of like, I think if I continued to pursue drop shipping for another 5 years, I'd be pretty freaking great at drop shipping. Like, if I just stuck with it, it'd be awesome. I think that's the issue, is I just got distracted by something else. And so, like, I wasn't like, oh, like, this isn't the right thing to be pursuing. It was like, oh, this is something better. Mm-hmm. Which is arguably like, maybe like if I just stuck with it, arguably I'd be more successful than I am now because I had more reps. Like, I planted the tree earlier.
Yeah, there certainly is more of a risk of, I think for the majority of people, it's more, how can I focus more on this one thing and not how do I stop focusing on it?
Yeah.
I think like what you're saying makes sense. Like setting aside everything else, especially those like the woman in the red dress, the exciting thing you see, you're like, oh, that's a great business idea. Let me go do that. Like, no, just stick to this one.
Yes.
Make that decision. That's gonna fit 90% of people.
I think 99.99. It's like, I think like the question of like knowing when to quit is applicable to, I have a good friend who's the #1 decathlete in the world. He's like Himothy Senior. He's 100% Himalayan. when it comes to decathlons. He's insane. He's also like 24 years old and at the peak of his career. I think someone in that situation, or the LeBron situation or the Kobe situation, where they've actually maxed out, it's like that's when you get to negotiate. Do I want to retire this thing? But it's like how I look at it, and maybe I'm just autistic, definitely am. But how I'm looking at it is like, is this something, and this is maybe the new frame I'm looking at, is like, do I want to be the best in the world at this thing, or do I at least want to be the best I can possibly be at this thing? So it's like, do I want to max out my capabilities in this thing? Is that worthwhile? And then if so, well, let me just go max it out and see how far I can get. And then at that point, I can decide whether I want to, retire the flag. It's like Boy Scouts. Like I maxed out in Boy Scouts. I did everything I could in Boy Scouts. Okay, I aged out. Let's move on.
So it's like the work up front. And I think Alex Hormozy talks about this, where it's just like he spends a lot of time making a decision, but then once it's made, he's all in.
Yes.
So it's like before you start something, decide if it's worthwhile, and then go try your absolute hardest. Once you become, top level competence at that thing, then you can
for sure
negotiate.
I think, or like set pre-existing standards or criteria beforehand. So like I'm not an athlete, or I wasn't an athlete, and then I signed up for a full distance Ironman out of zero. And I set the conditions of like, if I break a bone in my body, or I go unconscious training or get severely injured, I'll quit. If that does not happen, I cannot quit because I will negotiate. So it's like when I like dragged myself over the finish line half broken, like you bet your ass the last 14 hours, 39 minutes and 58 seconds, the majority of that I was negotiating. I'm like, I can just quit, but I set criteria beforehand. So it's to your point. It's like if you do 1 hour of research and decide it's worth 10 hours of work, and then you decide those 10 hours of work are worth another 100 hours of work. It's like you could set milestones to negotiate with yourself. I just think you have to do that before you actually get into it.
Right. Before the emotions are playing their toll.
For sure.
Yeah, I kind of had a similar... Not exactly. So I've only run marathons. I've never done a full
That's
Ironman.
badass.
And I did one with like very minimal training. And that was kind of I decided in my head, I was like, if I'm okay 3 weeks after the marathon, then this is like worthwhile. Like I'm willing to take an injury if it's only a 3-week injury. That's okay.
Damn.
Anything beyond that, then maybe I need to reconsider in the future, like doing this. But yeah.
That's cool, man. Like 80% of America can't even run an 8-minute mile.
Really?
Yeah.
80%. So
also 90% of statistics are made up. So caveat, disclaimer.
So that would mean 20. If you're at an 8-minute mile, you're in the top 20.
Yeah, something like that.
So.
Yeah, Google has a better statistical accuracy than I do, but I know it's a very small percentage.
Something like that.
Yeah.
That's cool. So did you never do sports?
Nope. I mean, I grew up mountain biking and skiing. So I grew up in rural Colorado, like ranching, biking, hiking, backpacking was a huge part of my childhood, but never any like team athletics.
Interesting. Do you want to have kids?
Mm-hmm.
Would you want them to play sports? Or what do you think about that?
I think that my lack of sports, like my exposure to sport, like the lack of that in my life fostered a highly individualistic personality. Like I'm very much my own person. And then I paired that with Boy Scouts. So like Boy Scouts was my sense of community, team, leadership. Like I still got an environment of team building and discipline and group focus. I don't think it was as strong of a container or as like tight of an experience as a sport would be, where it's like you win or lose. It's binary. It's very focused. It's very competitive. I want my kids to pursue excellence in whatever they want. And so like if my kids want to pursue sport, like I go back and forth on whether or not I regret not doing sports as a kid. Like can't change it now. I'm grateful for the life I've had, but I do think it's a really healthy thing for like community and team development.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of learning in that. A lot of like social understanding how to like exist within a social network of people, and like you're winning together, you're losing together.
Yeah.
You're constantly interacting with each other.
Yeah. Which is like, it's also interesting because I think that binary competitive worldview of like win-lose, like I never got that. And so like, I don't really think anything in my life is binary. Like I'm very much thinking on a spectrum of like nuance, which is good and bad because it's like, it's really hard to set boundaries with nuance. Mm-hmm. But it's also, I think, a lot more applicable to like meeting people where they are, because it's not you're a winner, you're a loser. It's where on the spectrum are you right now. So.
Okay, let's talk about this like boundary setting thing, because I've struggled with this in the past of like, how do you set these like milestones or like these things you need to do, but not in a way that's like overbearing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like don't be a dictator to yourself.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
Yeah, relatable. I don't think I have a fair answer for you, actually. I think like the human condition is like to pursue an ideal of ourselves that we always fall short of. And then it's like whether that pursuit of the ideal and falling short of the ideal, like we can use that to villainize ourselves, of like beat ourselves over the head and become like dictators or tyrants. Or we can use that to become defeated and just like, oh, I'll never be that, so I might as well just settle for mediocrity. And I don't think either is fair, because it's like I have met very successful people that are athletes or self-made billionaires or millionaires, and they're miserable and super insecure because they've just weaponized their insecurities in this pursuit of ideal. I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's the way to go. But I've also met a lot of people that just like won't even talk about their dreams because they're scared of their dreams because they don't want that to be real. And I think that's super lame. But I don't think I can give you a fair answer on like the best way to do it, because like newsflash, I'd fall short every day. It's funny, I'll oscillate. It's like, oh, one day like hate myself for not being enough, and the next day like want to just avoid my problems for whatever.
Yep. Yeah, no, I have that for sure. It used to be, for me, it used to be much more of the dictator. Probably the past like before this year, the past like 3 or 4 years was like that. And then this past year I've been trying to change that relationship and change it to be a more like, I call it like changing fuel sources, like changing from the negative to positive. So where I'm not like using the stick to motivate myself or being mean to myself or hating myself if I don't do my run today or don't eat healthy today. And instead trying to form a stronger connection with the positive of like, why am I doing this? What's the thing that's drawing me, not the thing that's pushing me away?
Right.
So I'm definitely working on that, but I've noticed that it can come with a swing in the other direction. Like you mentioned, the pendulum. It's like, there are some days where I like take advantage of that. I'm like, oh, I won't be mean to myself. I can just watch TV and like numb out on this.
Which doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Running until you cause an injury also doesn't work.
So yeah, finding that balance is tricky. And
it is.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes in the way you respond to things. It's like when you do mess up, what is your response to that? That you're completely negative to yourself? That's probably not good. It's also probably not good if you just avoid it completely. If you just are like, oh, I'm not going to think about it.
Yeah, I'll just justify everything happens for a reason. This was meant to be.
Yeah.
I'll just manifest it. I think that maybe the goal or the ideal to strive for is not to be on either level. I think like extremism in any regard is probably not healthy. Mm-hmm. And so maybe it's like being able to wield both tools effectively, of like know when it's time to go a little Goggins on yourself and know when it's time to go a little bit more Ram Dass. And so maybe can we have a little bit of both? I'm super curious because you mentioned like you've had experience in the past of like the dictator running your life. Like there's a camp of belief. There's a thought that a lot of people share that like hatred is the cleanest fuel. And it's like way better to operate out of self-inadequacy, self-hatred, vengeance towards others. And they're like, well, it's just easier. It's just cleaner. Like Goggins would probably tell you like, fuck your feelings, grow up. And so there is that thought logic. What was your experience running on negative emotionality?
My experience was that I think it was the time. So everything was very compulsive. It was like, I need to do this workout and I don't know why. I just know that I need to. And there's just like a feeling of dread that I remember, like a pretty consistent feeling of dread. Like if I had a long run coming up, the like night before or the morning leading up to it, I just had this like pit in my stomach of like, fuck, I do not want to do this at all. And I think that was related. I think that was the biggest thing, because it did motivate me very much so. Like I was on top of my shit. I would get basically everything that I told myself I was going to do, I would do. But it was outside of those things where I would notice the side effects of just like being less happy. And yeah.
What's cool about it is when you don't negotiate with terrorists, it doesn't matter how bad you feel about the run. It's like, this was my triathlon training was a lot of the same thing of like, it was just Goggins. It was like, wake up and carry the boats. It's like, go on the run. Oh, it's raining, go on the run. Oh, it's snowing, go on the run. Like, oh, it's a terrible day, go on the run. It's like, one day I was doing a bike ride. I was like 14 miles into a bike ride and I got flat tire. And so I picked up my bike and I ran home. And I'm like, that was gnarly. Like, that was very metal. But it was like, there was no negotiating. I was like, all right, like, here I go. Who's going to carry the boats? To your point though, I think like at least the symptoms that I saw in my own life is like working as much as possible, training as much as possible. Like this violent pursuit of doing these things came at the consequence of everything else in my life. So like I had no relationship with my family. The days that I didn't have training or work scheduled, I was just depleted. I would just lie in bed and not want to be alive. Yeah, I had no connection to anything. I was pretty much like I was a slave to myself, which was pretty miserable existence.
Yeah, it did also isolate me. I could definitely relate to that, where I just lived in this world of like, what's the next thing I have to do?
So because it's like me, right? Because there's no external processing of like, why am I doing this? How does this relate? There's no connection or correlation with anything other than I have to. And then it's like, I don't know. I think it's like a very old thought paradigm of like, that's kind of how we've built the world that we live in, is like by a lot of men and women living on vengeful spirits towards themselves or others. But yeah, I'm concerned of like the overcorrection of like everybody just using the law of attraction to sit in bed and manifest. It's like, that doesn't work either. What's been your experience in the last year moving more into your heart?
It's been definitely up and down. Like I'm not there yet, I would say, because I still have some of that vengeful spirit that's calling the shots sometimes. And then I also have like, the swings in the other direction. I think I'm moving in the right direction though. I think it's getting more to the point where I am doing what I want. I try to, so with dogs, I used to volunteer at the Austin Humane Society, and I took like their training class. And one of the things they would say is like, we don't do negative punishment. We only do positive because negative is too hard. Like if you're trying to punish your dog for things, they might not understand why you're punishing them. It's just too hard. Positive reinforcement really helps though, if you just give them a treat when they do the right thing. And so I think as humans, some humans, I fall into this category. I never have given myself positive reinforcement. And so I've been trying to do that more lately, which is just when I notice that I do something that I like is good for me, I go for a run or I go to a social thing that I didn't want to go to. Afterward, I just give myself a little like, good job. You did that. That was nice.
Yeah.
And I think it's those things that are like, that is going to pay off later on because I have that positive reinforcement. I'm like, oh yeah, if I do this thing, I'll be happier. I'll actually recognize it. So picking out the moments where I'm happy and that I've done something that made me feel good. Sitting in like the post-run high and just enjoying that and being like, this is what I'm going to remember about this run. I'm not going to remember the moment before where I like did not want to go. I'm going to focus on this part because I know that'll make it easier in the future.
That's huge. Yeah. I mean, and there's a ton of psychology to back it up, right? It's like we make more progress to our goals, we learn more effectively, and we're a lot more sustainable when we're actually anchoring on positive training. Same thing with animals, right? It's like way, way, way higher reinforcement when we just do it
What's positive?
The loving way. I think that like the negative mentalities, right? Like they're really, like it's good to run away from the cat only in like worst case scenarios. It's like it's like that's why humans have a stress response. It's like I think that there's what I really appreciate. I met a lot of successful and well-balanced and happy individuals where it's like they have non-negotiables in their lives. So like they're extremely disciplined with like what time they go to bed, or like what content they consume and what they don't consume, who they talk to and who they don't do. Like they have boundaries in their life that are like almost like that's the fiery line. Like there's a line that's like, I do not step on the other side of that because that's not who I am. And that's kind of where they've used those like almost like the barbed wire fences or those negative reinforcements. But then within whatever boundaries they've set, it's only positive reinforcement. It's only good things. But it's like, I think that at least in my own life, like if I let myself go free reign and free range, like I notice I'll fall into like very like our world is, we have so much accessible dopamine. Like I can just Uber Eats food. I can just get dopamine off my phone. I can just like, it's so easy to fall into just these instant gratifications that like, at least in my own life, I've realized that like, maybe it's just the season I'm in right now of like, I'm 24. I'm just trying to figure things out. Like I really don't know what I'm doing and I'm moving at a really high speed. And so I'm like, all right, high velocity, really big ambitions. I need to put bumpers on the bowling alley because I'm not throwing a perfect. Like I'm not rolling in a straight line. So I better have some bumpers. Otherwise I just spin out and I start watching Minecraft Let's Plays instead of getting work done, which doesn't work.
Yeah, there's I had a guest on just recently, and he talked about like setting up your environment where like success is the easiest thing. I think that's one way. And then yes, setting those boundaries for yourself is so huge. And what you're saying about dopamine is like so relatable. Like there's so much free dopamine out there. But the thing with dopamine is like when you use it, it does come from somewhere. Like your brain is using that dopamine. Now you don't have it.
It's a finite resource.
Ready for you. Yeah. And that's something I've thought about before is like, ideally I want to be getting dopamine to motivate me to do something beneficial, whether it's like work related or something positive. And when I get it from these other sources, it is wasting it.
Yeah.
It's using it on something that is just not beneficial. I had that recently. I've been rewatching Walking Dead with my girlfriend. I fucking like in 8th grade, I loved that show so much.
I love that.
And so now I've been like rewatching it and I've like got so into it. We watched like 3 episodes on Sunday and I found myself yesterday being like, why? Like, I don't need to work or anything. I could just watch The Walking Dead and that will be just as fun. And so I see that trap of like the free dopamine and knowing it's there.
Yeah.
And when I can draw boundaries, then it's not even a consideration. And then it's like, okay, this is where I get my dopamine. I get it from.
And then it's like, if you're going to have, if you're going to play with great power comes great responsibility, it's like being able to bond over something like The Walking Dead with your girlfriend's a beautiful thing on a Saturday, not in the middle of a Monday. But it's, Monday at 11 a.m. Dangerous, right? To your point, it's like the dopamine thing. Like, I'm not a clinical psychologist, but I think of it because it all comes down to, okay, it's a finite resource and humans, we naturally have like homeostasis or like a balance. And so like where I immediately start thinking is like we have like our brain has like a hot bar or like our favorite call list. It's like almost like our speed dial of like where are the most reliable ways that I know to get my dopamine to function. And so it's like it's really, I think, interesting when we have these things of like if you're going to have high dopamine activities that you know are high dopamine, I think you either need to set boundaries on it of like, okay, I know where I can and cannot use this. Or it's like, can I use this to move me into something else? So like there's the study of like flow and like the flow state and productivity where they found, I think it was Patagonia as a company, they found like when their executives went surfing before they did executive meetings, they were actually more productive. And so it's like, I think if it's either like, okay, I'm going to use this TV or this high dopamine activity as a controlled space where this only is for this environment because I'm with my girlfriend on a Saturday and that's when we do this. It's like Friday night, movie night, that's it. I don't watch movies on Monday, Tuesday, whatever. Or if it's not in a container like that, oh my God, I love surfing. Let me stack this with another activity like a executive meeting that is high intensity that I need to get through.
Do you do that with anything in your life?
Nicotine actually. And so like I've gone back and forth on like using nicotine, not using nicotine. So it's interesting because I've vaped since I was 11 years old. So I picked up vaping at a really young age. And so like I've gone like when I did my Ironman, no nicotine. And so I've gone long periods of my life without vaping, but it's been a relative cornerstone in my life. So, I mean, 13 years is more than half of my life, which is kind of crazy to think about. So like I would classify myself as a smoker at this point in time, which is not a great thing. But I know that. And so I'm like, okay, if I'm going to have this habit in my life, can I at least use this habit so it's not a total net negative? Like, is it ruining my lungs? Sure. Am I sucking on an adult binky? Absolutely. Is this a bunch of candy flavored chemicals? Yes. And what if I hit this when I get done with the gym or before I go to the gym, or when I'm getting into a meeting or when I'm done with a meeting? Like, can I use this to at least release dopamine at critical moments when I'm in other activities instead of just walking around? Like, at least let me be constructive with this behavior.
Okay, that's a good one. I know that's been on the rise now lately. Has been nicotine for like productivity.
I think it's just cope, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. For myself, for sure. Like nicotine, I think it's net negative. You know, it's like I don't care really how you spin the story.
Yeah, luckily I never got too deep into it. When I used to drink, I would only ever use it if I was like pretty drunk, and then I like loved it. But other than that, I never really liked it when I was
it's
sober.
Neurologically more addictive than cocaine.
Really?
Yeah. The brain fucking loves nicotine. Like our brains are just wired to just fiend. It's like,
has it been hard to quit when you have had off periods?
It's interesting because sometimes yes, sometimes no. And so it's like, it's what's really interesting is success is 80% your environment. So step number one is what's in your environment. To your friend, it's like make winning easy, because it's like everything comes at the cost of something else. So it's like if I'm around smokers, brutally hard. Like when I stopped smoking herbs and spices, really hard when I had a bunch of friends that were smoking herbs. Hey, what are you doing, bro? Hey, we're going to go smoke. Do you want to join us? Like, oh, it was the worst. Or I'd hang out with them and they'd smell like it. And I'm like, oh my God, I just want some. So the environment is a huge part of it. So like I live in a household and I have a social circle where nobody else smokes. So it's super easy versus when I was surrounded by it all the time, it was almost impossible. So the environment, 80% of your success, just the environment. And then the other 20%, the universe loves a vacuum. And so it's like, how I look at it is like, if I remove something from my speed dial of dopamine hits, so if I remove an activity that gives me dopamine, I better have something in really close proximity that I can replace it with. Otherwise, I'm cooked. I'm absolutely screwed. Because like how I think about it is like, okay, I have this dopamine that let's say is vaping right now. And so it's like my brain, when it reaches for dopamine, nicotine, vaping is right here. It's super high accessibility. If I don't have anything else as accessible, I have to create this less accessible and I have to make something else more accessible. So let's say I want to replace it with just breathing, right? Breath work. And so I need to first bring the habit of breath work in high proximity. Let me get in the habit of breath work. Let me familiarize myself with breath work. Let me start reaching for breath work as a tool. And now let me remove nicotine from my environment. So this is high accessibility. This is low accessibility. And now when there's the vacuum in my life of, oh my God, I want dopamine. Wait a second, this is way out here, but this is right here, so I can just reach for this instead. But I think like the universe loves a vacuum and you have to know what you're filling it with.
So that's incorporating it before it gets to that point. Before you actually remove it.
Yeah, or just like raise the, so it's, I think it's either bring something else in or just make this so far removed, either physically or psychologically, of like, the other way to do it is just ramp up the psychological consequence. And it's like when I was running my Ironman, like when I started training, I noticed I would like come home and I'd vape and I would hate it. Like it hurt my lungs. I'd be coughing. I'm like, oh my God, this is the worst. And so I started visualizing like not being able to finish the Ironman because I'm sitting here sucking on a binky. And so I'm like, okay, it's either suck on the binky or do the thing that I actually want to do, that now my whole family's expecting me to do, that I've declared on social media that I'm doing. I'm like, do I want to publicly fail because of a freaking Chinese chemical binky? Or do I want to just stop using the binky? And so I just removed it so far psychologically that my entire ego, my entire pride was like, absolutely not, no way. Yeah, but I think what's like more sustainable, talking about positive reinforcement instead of like, oh my God, if I do this thing, I'm going to fail. I was like, okay, let me put distance between myself, but let me also bring in something that has higher accessibility. So then I'm not just sitting there scratching.
Right. Just like gritting your teeth through it.
Bingo.
Do you drink now?
No.
Did
I've never really cared about alcohol. Yeah. I get my first time ever drinking, I got hungover. And ever since then, I still get hangover. I just don't like alcohol.
That's good, man. That's, yeah, there's some people, like the alcohol seems to hit people differently. Some people love it. And some people just like, I don't.
Yeah. I honestly, like, same thing as sports. Sometimes I'm jealous, right? Like, I see some of the boys just smashing brews watching sports. And I'm like, I wish I could relate. That sounds like so much fun. But
yeah,
not my thing.
Yeah, I definitely was on that end of just like enjoyment. But my brother is like the opposite. Like he'll have like a beer occasionally and just one, like he never has more than one or two. And I'm the opposite. Like when I really liked it. And so I would always overdrink.
Yeah, I will say like, so I dislike beer. So if I'm going to drink, it's usually like whiskey. I love old fashions. I like craftsmanship. So of course I'm going towards cocktails like that. Espresso martini is great. I have the same issue of like self-control of like anything I do, I try to pursue excellence. And so it's like when I do drink, I definitely drink. So I just figure it's better to avoid altogether.
Your business, what has been the evolution of it till now? So I think we talked about the early stages of, you kind of helped, you did this with the paper shredding business and you took off on your own. How'd you start and how did it evolve?
So paper shredding is really where I like realized the power of social media marketing and just online marketing. It's like where I learned about Google search ads and how awesome it is to like be able to find people that actually want to buy your thing on the internet. Imagine that. So that was like kind of my first like big hit was Google search ads and online marketing. And then my second big hit was for a client doing Facebook ads. And so it was a gym in Colorado, really high ticket. So a very like specialized gym. It was like $2,000 a month, like not like $100 a month member, like $2,000 a month, very expensive gym. And they're running Facebook ads, and these Facebook ads were working. And I'm like, why the fuck are these, like, who clicks on a Facebook ad and signs up for a $2,000 a month gym membership? So I got like really interested in these Facebook ads, and they were working really well. And so I got really interested in Facebook ads. And then my third step of success was for a guy named Gerard, and he was selling a mastermind. Like he was selling like, hey, he sold his last company for $50 million at like 27 years old. So like really successful guy. And he was doing like these business masterminds, these community events. And him and his team, they're looking for an appointment setter. And so they're like, hey, we just need you to be logged into his Instagram, go into his Instagram DMs, and convince people to hop on sales calls with the sales team. Like, that's it. Just go in the DMs. Hey, this is Harrison with Gerard's team. Ask him a couple questions, like qualify them, book a sales call. And saw really big success with that. And so like I started like compounding of like paper-wise from 0 to 36K in monthly revenue in 9 months. Primarily like 80% of that from Google ads. Oh, wait a second. Then the gym, I don't think I can actually disclose their numbers. Because the other two I didn't have NDAs with. And then Gerard, we were doing like 6 figures a month off of Instagram DMs. And I'm like, and so I'm making good money because I like have my agency in the DMs for this guy.
These like DM ads?
Yeah, no, not even DM ads.
Just
this
DMs
is like
from
him
people.
posting a story like, if this is you, swipe up.
Okay.
And then I would ask the questions of like, where are you based? What are your goals? What are your problems? I think we may be able to help. Are you open to that? Great. What time are you available? Awesome. What's your email? Awesome. I sent you a calendar invite. And then sales team would take it from there. And I had this mentor while working with Gerard. His name was Mike. And Mike is still like someone I just really respect and look up to. He was like the sales guy. He was the sales guy on the team. Really awesome guy. Just quality fabric of character. Like just really great guy. So I go from the Google ads to the Facebook ads to the DM appointment setting. And then I was traveling. I booked a flight to Montreal, Canada, and a return flight from Vancouver, Canada, 30 days later. And so I was traveling across and it was supposed to be like this client project, and this guy was supposed to pick me up and pay me all this money to travel across the country and film all this content and do this marketing thing. I show up to Montreal, Canada with $200 in my bank account, and he's not texting me back. He disappears on me, never paid me the money. He's like, oh, I'll pay for the flights. I'll pay you this X amount of thousands of dollars to fly here and do this project with me and be on this 30-day road trip. And I'm like over the moon. I'm like, this is gonna be the coolest thing ever. I can't believe I'm getting paid to do this. I show up, dude disappears. I have $200 in my bank account. I go on this app called Couch Surfers, and I sleep on this dude. Ganesha's couch for a week in Montreal. And then a good buddy of mine picks me up, and I go to his house. And while I'm at his house, I have like $100 left in I think I had like $40 in my bank account. And I'm like, like, how am I going to get across the country? I can't even afford a flight home if I wanted to. I'm sleeping in my buddy's house. Like, I'm like, my life is a mess. No security, no savings. Because at this point, I'd spent all my savings, like trying to figure out the business and rent, whatever. And so I'm sitting there, and the guy I'm living with, his name is Majid. And Majid has a business teaching people how to public speak speaking. Mm-hmm. And really, really awesome business, really great guy, subject matter expert, has spoken on over 1,000 stages, has had like hundreds of clients, has written a book, like really, really awesome guy. And we were sitting there, and I was talking about like, oh yeah, we did like 140,000 for Gerard in 30 days on Instagram. And he's like, how did you do that? And I was like, oh, it's really easy. Like we just did this and this and this. And he's like, can you do that for me? And I was like, yeah, sure. And so he was like, okay, how much do you want? And I was like, $5,000. And he's like, done. And so we did 60K organically in the first 30 days. Like I had no idea what I'm doing. I'm just kind of putting this together with this virtual assistant in the Philippines. Her name was Earl. So we have Earl in the Philippines and then me, and I'm trying to like move my way across the country. It was awesome. And so then I get home and then I just started compounding from Instagram appointment setting. And now I have like all these complementary skill sets, right? So like I have a background in photography and videography, so I understand content a little bit. I really enjoyed writing in high school. And then I have like the website design and the Google ads and the Facebook ads and the landing pages, all these different skills that I didn't know that I needed. And now they all complement. And I'm doing DMs and like I'm doubling my revenue month over month. And so I go from like barely making rent buying groceries to like having excess and having more excess and having more excess. And I got to a point. Sorry, am I yapping too much?
Okay, please continue.
Beautiful. It's a great time. So I got to this point where like things are actually starting to come together and my life is chaotic at this point. Like now I'm 21 years old. I'm on target to make multiple six figures a year. And like, I don't even know what I'm doing. I don't have any project management. Like I don't know how to pay taxes. Like I'm just kind of flying by the seat of my pants. And I ended up going to Mexico to meet up with this guy, Leo, who started a marketing agency very similar to what I was doing in London called Traffic Hive. My company at the time was called Co-Creates. So I have Co-Creates. He has this company, Traffic Hive. Now, Traffic Hive is a lot more, he's been in the business like 6 years. I've been in business 2 years. And we meet up in Mexico, him and his business partner, Thor. Thor and I are still really close. I really like Thor. And he convinces me, he's like, hey, you should bring Co-Creates and be a part of Traffic Hive. And we're doing 6 figures a month, not a year. And I'm like, oh, sign me up. And they're working with like all the biggest guys in internet marketing, like Cardone Ventures and ClickFunnels. I've never actually told this story in detail before. That's cool. So anyways, I'm like, dude, I'll sign up. Let's do it. And I call up my buddy Byron. Byron sold his company to Goldman Sachs for like X amount of millions. Like, not X, like tens, maybe a lot of money to Goldman Sachs. And he's like in his 50s, like really, really, really smart, successful, fit, just great guy. Really, really, really successful. And Byron is like, don't do it, dude. He's like, you made X. He's like, you made this much money this month. You're on target to make more. You have something that's working. Fix the delivery and just do what you're doing. Keep your head down. And I'm like, but shiny objects, but the girl in the red dress. And so I essentially shut down my agency and I joined this other company, Traffic Hive, with doing zero research on them, like, because they didn't vet me. So I'm like, oh, I don't need to vet them. We're good to go. They're doing 6 figures a month. Perfect. Look at their clients. And so like signed no legal contracts. Like I don't think we did any kind of NDA, non-compete. I did no financial research on them and like actually what are their numbers and like how legit are the numbers? What's the profitability? What's the cost of goods sold? What's the operating expenses? Do they carry debt? What's their free cash flows? Like I didn't understand finance. I didn't understand how to operate a business. So I'm not looking at revenue per employee, operating expenses, capital expenditures. Like I don't know any of this. I'm like, do they have debt? Do they not have debt? None of it. So I come into the company with pretty much no idea of what I'm going to be doing, how I'm going to be supporting the company or what they even do, other than they do similar things to I do. And they work with awesome, awesome companies. And I don't regret it now. It was a great decision. It was a terrible decision, great lessons. January of 2022, we all fly to Norway. And we do an executive like team retreat in Norway. And during this retreat, the team, and they've all been working together for like 4 to 5 years, they decide this guy that they've never worked with, that Leo and I met 2 months before this in October of 2021. They're like, no, this would have been 2020. This would have been 2023, excuse me, January 2023. They're like, during this, we're staying in a cabin in the middle of the woods in Norway. And they're like, you're going to be the CEO. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like my ego feels great. I'm like, look at me go. And so Leo essentially hands me the reins to his company and is like, all right, cool. I'm going to go. He's like sick. He's going through some health issues. He's like, all right, I'm going to go work on my own stuff. Good luck. And so now I'm like left with this company. At the point I joined, I think we did 110K in revenue, top line, like cash collected in January. And I think we spent 140,000 and we had nothing in the bank account. Like we had zero extra money. And it turned out we were like $500,000 in debt. And so I come into this situation where now I feel all of the I have 100% responsibility and 0% equity. And it's like, I'm building someone else's asset. I'm building someone else's company with no percentage of the pie, but the buck stops with me. It's like, if it falls apart, it's because of me. If clients fail, I fail. If team fails, it's my fault. If people don't get paid, it's on me. And so like, I came into the situation, like had no idea what I was doing.
What was your incentive structure like?
So this is the issue, is like I just take ownership over everything I do in my life. Like I believe that like the buck stops with me. So like I didn't have incentive. And this is where it was
Like, did you have a salary for being
So-
CEO, or how did it?
Yeah, so originally had a salary and a percentage of revenue. So it started 5% of all cash collected and a 10K base. And then I'm like, well, we're operating at a negative percentage, so I can't take a 5% because now I'm just going to bleed an already hemorrhaging company. And I'm like, if my goal is to stop the bleeding, the easiest thing to stop the bleeding is cut my own rev share.
Yeah.
And so it's like I never took that off of my compensation package. I just never paid myself. And then I was like, well, I don't need 10K a month. I can take 5K a month. And then 3 months in, I was like, I don't need the 5K a month. I'll just pay myself nothing. And I'm completely lost sight of I have zero equity. So I should be taking every dollar I can while fixing every other part of the business. So like, I get my 5%, I get my 10K, I get my 5%, and then whoever I need to fire, whatever I need to do with clients to make sure that I still take care of myself. Of like, I didn't put on my own oxygen mask. I was running around the plane putting on everybody else's oxygen masks, and I burn out. So I'm living in Morocco. At this point, it's like the Holy Trinity, right? I'm like living in Morocco, running this multiple 7-figure company. Like I'm in great shape. I'm like, oh my God, I'm successful. When the reality is I have a body that is amazing because I hate myself. And I think that's what I need. Talking about the toxic motivation. I'm dating this girl, not because I'm madly in love with her, but because I think she's like, it's what society told me I should want. A beautiful, successful, intelligent woman. I still have the highest regard of respect for Reem. She's amazing. And then I'm running this company that on the outside, we work with all of the biggest names in internet marketing. And we're like, the Stripe screenshots look awesome, like 75K a day. But internally, we're like just bleeding out. So it's like outside looking in is awesome. Inside looking out, I feel like I've drowned myself. I'm like, I got everything I wanted and I'm worse off than I've ever been. So I'm in Morocco. I end up injuring my knee. I tear my patellar tendon and my PCL ligament, and I lose the ability to walk. I get black market opioids on the Moroccan black market. And so now I'm addicted to opiates in Morocco. So I fly home. I move back in with my parents, get knee surgery, get a staph infection, lose the ability to walk. Like I just get gut punched. So like I lose the shape, end up moving home, break up with the girl because now I don't live there. And then I stepped down from the company. So I was like, all right, let me just cut all this out. And then I spent like a year just essentially trying to like take all those lessons, incorporate them, and change the fuel. I think based on like the conversation topic is like really like coming back to like, why am I doing the things that I'm doing? How can I show up differently? What's the character traits? So that was like a freaking 20-minute yap, but here we are. And so yeah, left Traffic Hive, and for the last year I've been like really nerding out on personal branding and social media marketing, but not from a place of I need to make a lot of money, not from a place of, oh, I have to be doing this for the rest of my life, or I'm doing it for clout, but more so, let me do this out of curiosity as I explore like, why am I doing things and why does the world respond to these things? So actually right now, which is really exciting, I'm launching a new company. And so we're going through the launch right now of LCG, or Liminal Consulting Group. So liminal is this where is the transition, or the space between spaces. And so it's like this liminal is a space where like reality is transcended. It's like this transition or this initiation from something into something new, right? It's like that moment where things click. So Liminal Consulting Group, essentially it's like breaking or fixing bottlenecks within businesses when it comes to marketing on social media. So I'm really, really excited about it. And now I'm like coming from a cleaner fuel, but that's been, sorry you asked, bro, but here we are.
Okay. So tell me about that. What's that like to go from absolutely nothing to within months, like when you're doing your co-creates on your own, within months making, like more money than you've ever seen in your life? What was that like?
Yeah.
And also like before that, it wasn't even that you didn't have money. It was like you were in this, like you were like stranded in Canada. So I bet you felt it even more. It wasn't like you're broke in your hometown. It was like you're broke somewhere else and you can't get home, or you can't get to where you need to be because of money. So what's that like?
Definitely a great lesson. You were talking about faith, like having faith in yourself and faith in something bigger than yourself, that it's figure outable, is like the most important thing. Because that was gnarly. It was like really gnarly of like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And then also seeing the downside of other humans of like, I better have contingencies. Like Like if the client says he's going to pay for the flights, have him pay for the flights before you get on the plane. If the client says he's going to send you the retainer, have him send you the retainer before you fly to Canada. Like just higher levels of preparation. So it taught me a lot on that side and belief in myself that I can figure it out. Again, luck is preparation meeting opportunity. Like got really lucky. And then in terms of like the come up, I think it's very dangerous, right? So like they say that like the majority of the majority of lottery winners go broke in a couple years because they don't have the financial disciplines or the lessons that come with gradually improving your income. I think the same is true for celebrities and like all of these like online like Wi-Fi gurus or like online influencers, celebrities on the internet that like go from 0 to 5 million followers.
Athletes too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like there's a reason of. I think that being effective managing little, or at least being effective managing your money is a requirement for great increase. Otherwise you just blow it. Cause like I was making money where I'm like, oh my God, look at all this money, but I wasn't managing it. Like there was no financial stewardship or discipline that came with it. And it took a lot of hard lessons to realize that. It's like first the ego got inflated making all this money. I'm like, oh my God, here's the come up. I'm going to be a millionaire. Oh. And then it went from like, and then it got super inflated working with Traffic Hive where I'm completely out of touch with reality because I'm making zero money, but I feel like a millionaire and I'm acting like a millionaire because I'm running $1 million, but $1 million top line, we're doing like multiple millions of dollars top line means nothing if you don't save any, right? It's like we were just running a really effective hose. Like we didn't have a bucket. We're not keeping any of the water. So then it's like I had to like humble myself. I had to like come back and like actually say, okay, let me get back to some fundamentals.
So what's something you are currently struggling with?
I think one of my biggest frustrations right now is patience with myself. It's really awesome that I've won the lottery. You know, I know it's possible. It's like I've got to see the other side. I have a friend and she says we're all swimming down shit river and most people never get a chance to get a breath of fresh air. And so it's like I've gotten a breath of fresh air. Like I know what it's like to be able to travel to the Four Seasons and to have an executive assistant and be able to insulate yourself with like time and exclusive. Like I don't think that we should economically discriminate. It just in the world, I think it's not a great model of how we interact as humans. I do think it's pretty awesome to be able to travel and afford nice things and be able to afford the luxuries of like healthy food and clean water and safe shelter. It's like I've lived in Mexico and Canada and Morocco, and I've lived in those places in really, really, really high-end resorts. And I've also lived in hostels where I'm sharing a room. I can tell you 100% I sleep better in the silk bed in the nice resort for sure. It's like by far, it's a very big difference.
Yeah.
So I think like what I'm struggling with now is like I've touched that life and I want that life and I know what it looks like to have the discipline and the external abundance. And so it's like being patient, knowing that this time around I don't want it right now. I want to spend the next 10 years building it so that it isn't like I actually want to like build the habits and the behaviors and be intentional with the time it takes instead of just being a mess and chaotically getting there and falling apart again.
What kind of building off that, what does your dream life look like?
I've actually been meditating on this like all that, or praying on this, reflecting, journaling on this all the time. I just want to be a good dad. I want to have the preparation, the preparedness in my life to financially be equipped for my family, to have the time to be equipped for my family. I think like these words of like legacy and impact get thrown around a lot. I think the reality is like the best thing that we could ever do is like raise good kids, because then they raise good kids and they raise like that's really impact. It's like if I get lucky and I find a good business or a good opportunity and I can change the world by making sidewalks and stoplights or finding clean energy or something, like awesome, I would love that. I'd love to be a part of that. I think I'm humble enough now in my life to realize that I'm probably not going to reinvent the wheel. So I would rather just be a good dad, and I would like to be prepared to reinvent the wheel if that opportunity presents itself.
Yeah, I like to think about that too, about like who I am, the father that I'm building myself into. Like that's kind of the way I see my current life, where I'm at right now. It's like I'm just building the man who I want to be for kids that I don't have yet.
Have you heard that saying, he who loves walking goes much farther than the man who wants the destination? It's also funny, right? Like they say like wealth whispers. And it's like when you really look at it, like most successful people throughout history, it's like they didn't wear Gucci and Louis Vuitton, or it's like, sure, they might have a nice boat and a nice couple of cars. I mean, relative to their wealth, it's actually not that much money. But they just really they really enjoyed what they did. It's like they really enjoyed their work or whatever they were doing. They're like, this is just what I want to pursue. And I think like that's the ideal to strive for, is like, just be good at what you do, and who gives a shit what else anybody thinks about it.
Enjoy what you're doing, and then if that ends up supporting you, that's amazing. I have a friend who is a psychologist, and he put together his own practice just this past year, and he's talking about how he got to a point where he had like 1 week he had like 38 clients he saw, and I couldn't believe that. I was like, that's crazy. Like that's like 38 hours of talking to people.
Yeah, it's
like,
nonstop.
Yeah, that demands so much from you, but that is exactly what he loves doing. Like he went to school for that. He like, this is his life passion, is being a psychologist and meeting with people.
Yeah.
And helping people.
Yeah, he's trained his whole life for that opportunity.
Yeah, and now he's here. He's got it.
That's so cool. I love that. It's interesting, right? It's like, I think that like we were talking about like measuring up to an ideal, like always falling short of an ideal. It's like, at least for me, like the coolest things we can pursue is like a passion or a work or a profession that we feel is worthy and that we're equipped for, that we're naturally skilled for, and family. I don't want to put on my tinfoil hat. I don't know if we do that on this show, but I think like we've seen the erosion of the family unit over like 100 years.
For sure, yeah.
It's really sad, because it's like, I think that the family unit and like society operating as one big family is like the most powerful way a society can operate. It's like the most impactful thing. So I'm like, all right, let me just specialize as an individual in one thing and be really good at it, and let me be an awesome family man. It's like, if you do that, you win.
Yeah, this might not be the time, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on like parenting and all that.
Yeah.
Because that's something I'm beginning to think about, and it's so difficult to even know where to start. Yeah, that's a great conversation we could have.
Yeah. I think that the only thing that we could talk about as we kind of move towards wrapping up here on parenting, and this is, I think, actually much broader scope than parenting, because I'm not a parent, you're not a parent, so maybe we can't comment, or we can theorize, right? We could sit here and talk hypotheticals, but the thing that we could comment on is like integrity. And it's like, the thing that I'm reconciling is, if I want to be a good dad, I probably shouldn't sleep with a lot of women. Am I in integrity with that? It's like, are my actions aligned with that thing? And so it's like the same thing with like raising a dog. It's like, if you want your dog to be well trained, well, are you actually in integrity with that? Are you rewarding your dog for good behavior? And are you creating environments where they don't, like, if you leave your dog locked in your house for 10 hours and a pee's in the house, is that your fault or the dog's fault, right? It's like, do you set them up to succeed, and then do you reward them? So I've been kind of thinking about like fatherhood, parenthood, raising children in that same way of like, if I say that there's that saying like, do as I do, not as I say, of like, if I say that I want to be this kind of dad and I'm taking actions that are in conflict or contradiction to that, why? Let me figure out, because then it's like the emotional, that like woo-woo, that healthy fuel of like, why is that happening? And let me shift the emotionality, and also let me brute force my way out of that, because that doesn't serve no matter what. Yeah.
All right, Harrison, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. Where can people find out more about you?
William, first and foremost, this was awesome. I usually am sitting in your chair, and it's nice to just yap. It was like very cathartic. Hopefully the conversation was semi-entertaining, and I didn't go too far out of left field. People can find me on social media, Instagram, and it's the Harrison Coley. So it's just THE, my name, Harrison Coley, COLEY. That's it, the Harrison Coley.
Awesome. Thank you again, man.
Yeah, rock and roll. Thanks for having me.
Bye, everybody.